Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and tonight we are continuing our Bermuda Triangle deep dive series with part 17 as we look into chapter 3 of Gian J. Quasar's Into the Bermuda Triangle. Tonight's show, we will be talking about some ships that have disappeared. Hey Jason and hey Woo, good to see y'all here. Yeah, we got a little bit more with the intro is fairly new, so thank you, I appreciate that. But I did some research on the different ships that we're covering in today's chapter, and we will be showing them on screen as we're reading about them. So let me know how you guys like that. I think it's going to be a good thing and possibly a staple going forward, because I do want to make this as interactive as possible for all you. So, good to see you all here. We are getting this rolling. All right. Yeah, so I guess I'll take a moment here. Earlier today, the legendary pro wrestling superstar Hulk Hogan passed away. I was planning on doing a show tonight on that, but we, being Jeremy and myself, we're going to be doing a Madness Hour tomorrow evening in memory of Hulk Hogan. So be sure to catch that one. We'll be talking about our memories and possibly doing a watch along. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, as of right now, with the time crunch and everything, Jeremy has work in the morning. I do the eBay resell, so I'm working at all hours, so it doesn't really matter to me, but it needs to fit Jeremy's schedule. But it's no biggie. We'll be doing a show tomorrow on Hulk Hogan and the legendary career that he left behind. But yeah, thank you, Jason. So we'll be starting this show today. The chapter 3 of this book is titled The Riddle of Vanished Ships. And we do have photographs here to correlate with the different ships that we're talking about tonight. There's about 30 pages for this chapter. If I run this show till midnight, it's gonna run into Abe's show, but I guess so be it, right? Anyways, I will do my best to show the photos as we go. I do have it pretty organized, but yeah, just bear with me. First, we have our usual slideshow from last week, so I will get that up. And then as we approach the different photographs here, or I say last week, it's been nearly 3 weeks. I apologize about that. Let's see what this... Alright. We got the Illuminati here. So again, this photo montage, this is all of this underwater ship, submarine, whatever you want. It's a submersible. It ended up finding a road on the bottom of the ocean in the Atlantic, and it crawled across it. So, all right. Again, we're reading from Into the Bermuda Triangle by Gian J. Quasar. We are starting Chapter 3, The Riddle of Vanished Ships. And one more time, I'd like to apologize for the start time. I had a childhood friend stop by that I hadn't seen in many years. They showed up unannounced. What am I supposed to do? So, caught up a little bit with him. And I'm sure you'll be seeing him on this channel eventually, because this individual that stopped by tonight is the reason why I got involved in the Matrix. So more on that later. But let's begin, shall we? Chapter 3. The Riddle of Vanished Ships. Ships have been disappearing in the Bermuda Triangle for a considerable period of time. Because many of these disappeared in the days before radios and scheduled position reports, the exact location where they vanished was never known with precision. However, after the Avengers disappeared in 1945, a review of earlier disappearances of ships revealed that they were concentrated along routes that took them through the area now called the Bermuda Triangle. Contemporaneous reservations were no doubt held that storms and mutiny could account for some of them. But whatever the cause, we today are left with the dramatic picture of great sailing ships turning toward this area of sea, their masts hidden in the shrouds of billowing canvas, before slipping over the horizon, never to be seen again. Sea of Doom, Graveyard of the Atlantic, and Sargasso Graveyard were names given to in the 18th and 19th centuries to specific areas in the Atlantic, all of which traverse the modern Bermuda Triangle or are areas sometimes included in the triangle's boundaries. Sea of Doom was a general area of the sea lanes around Bermuda, while Graveyard of the Atlantic specifically meant the Virginia and Hatteras Capes. That's spelled Hatteras. And Sargasso Graveyard was applied to the Sargasso Sea, the westernmost part of which overlaps the entire center of the modern Bermuda Triangle. Here is the Sargasso Sea. And hey, Paul, welcome to the channel. Paul says, "Hi, this is my first time on this channel. I support PRE and SEC, and your host also supports them, as he has been a host and very regular guest. So thank you for me being here." Well, thank you, Paul. Yeah, Abe's a good guy. I assume that's who you're talking about. Yeah, I'm going to try to hop on over to the stream that he's doing later. He's doing another open mic night. So it's going to be talking about whatever. And he's leaving it open tonight. But there's a lot that happened today, so I'm sure we're going to be talking about pro wrestling. It's a shame, man. Hogan was supposed to be getting better. Hey, Texas, good to see you. Alright, so what we're looking at here on the screen is the Sargasso Sea. And something specific about this area that I looked up before the show here. It is a sea that does not have any land around it. Like, it's part of the Atlantic, but it's its own thing. The currents and everything make it so that it's within its own boundaries. And apparently it's, I think, the only sea that's like that, where there's no land boundaries. Yeah, making time for all this stuff is a little challenging, but you know, we're getting through it. I'd much rather do a show later than not at all. And I mean, it's not respectful to any of you out there that follow and I tell you a certain time. But we're here. And we're getting into the vanished ships tonight. And I think you guys will enjoy it. So, getting back to the book, I'll carry on here. And feel free to chat. I'm good with pausing the reading at any time to talk with all you. Hey, Andres, good to see you. Got a good crowd here tonight. The Sargasso Sea has been a mystery since it was discovered. Essentially ovoid or elliptical, it covers the central Atlantic Ocean from 20 to 35 degrees north latitude and 30 to 72 degrees west longitude, starting about 300 miles off the east coast of the U.S. and extending into the eastern Atlantic. The Sargasso Sea is often considered one of nature's greatest oddities, for while the North Atlantic is cold and tempestuous, this area is largely an immobile body of warm water with weak currents. Its relative calmness may largely be the result of strong surrounding currents completely interlocking and isolating it, making the currents within it largely entropious, that is, rotating inward and remaining weak. But the sky above the Sargasso Sea is also plagued by deadly calms. Its warmer temperatures make the area high in evaporation, more stable, and less prone to wind. The Spanish became victims of this first when many of their galleons en route to the New World would lie becalmed, deprived of wind with no strong currents to carry them out. The doldrums traverse here, calling attention to the depressed and melancholy nature of the area, and so do the horse latitudes, a name that comes from the gruesome sight of bloated, dead horses floating about. For during the stagnant weeks of waiting for wind, the Spanish were often forced to kill and throw overboard their war horses to conserve water. But the Sargasso Sea receives its name from its greatest oddity, a unique form of seaweed. We can look at it from further out here, but I got a close-up as well. There we go. A unique form of seaweed that floats lazily over its entire expanse called sargassum, a Latinized word from the Portuguese meaning grape or grape-like. Tiny, hollow, grape-like bladders grow from the stems of the sargassum and keep it floating. This unique characteristic has fascinated and confused sailors since it was first observed by Christopher Columbus, who recorded in his log the following over a period of 2 weeks, as later compiled by Brother Bartolome de las Casas in his Diario from September 16th through October 3rd of 1492. Here they began to see many bunches of very green vegetation. When dawn came, they saw much more vegetation and what seemed to be river weed, and they saw much weed, although the day before they had seen none. At dawn, Friday, September 21st, they found so much weed that the sea appeared to be solid with it, and it came from the west. For part of the day, there was no weed. Later, it was very thick. Saturday, September 22nd. The weed was plentiful, and the crabs were found in it. The sea had been calm and smooth. The sea became very calm, because of which many sailors went swimming. They saw much weed. The sea was always smooth and good. Many thanks be given to God. Always, says the Admiral Columbus. Weed was coming from the east to west, contrary to its usual direction. And there was much weed, some very old and some very fresh, and it bore something like fruit. Wednesday, October 3rd. So again, they were seeing big bunches of it like this here. And let me catch up in the chat real quick. Oh, wow. Yeah, there's been people that have been having trouble with being on Abe's show. There's been some really weird audio anomalies as of late. I'm not sure what to make of that. I'm going to take a short break from reading here as I catch up. Yeah, we support each other here pretty well. I'm very happy that you guys have followed me from Abe's channel. We share a lot of common interests. And with as focused and detailed as I am with certain topics, it's like I need to do my own shows like this. And I do find it easier to it just being a solo show than having other people on, which I have no problem with, but this helps us keep focused and directed here. And yes, Texas, we're family as far as I'm concerned, Paul. Yep, I agree with that. Yes, Paul, we definitely need camaraderie here. It's very far and few in between, right? Okay, so I do have a photo from a book here. So let me get this all transitioned in. All right. So it's an overhead map. It says the area covered by the Sargasso Sea in the central Atlantic. The entire body of water slowly rotates and changes location, though only slightly, within the Atlantic. So I guess you could liken it to, like, you see all of those, like the debris piles in the middle of the ocean. This is similar, but it's just with seaweed. All right. So the last thing I read was an insert from a diary that was written in 1492. I'm sure that there's accounts that go back even further, but as you know, we have history that continues to get wiped. So part of doing all of this is to help keep that intact as much as possible. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, we're being as open as possible with the topics that we discuss over on Abe's channel. And I'm very grateful for him giving us platforms to do so. Alright, let's get further into this. This is going to be a long show if I do the whole chapter. Hopefully we can. I really hope we can. But there's a lot of information here, just keep in mind. And I'm trying to make this series be a catch-all for Bermuda Triangle. I'm trying to cover as much as possible, but there's so much to this. But we're getting there. We're getting much further than other attempts that I've seen with this. So let's carry on. This last observation no doubt refers to the little bladders or pods that grow from the stems. Prior to this, seaweed was seen only along the coasts where it grew from rocks in the shallows. Columbus, it is said, even sounded the area, thinking land must be nearby. In his case, the nearest land was miles below on the Nares abyssal plain, and that's spelled Nares. No bottom reading was particularly alarming to his crew, and one might even imagine to Columbus himself, especially after weeks of seeing so much seaweed with no land in sight. Moreover, since the weed was greeted as a portent of land nearby, Columbus had to be ready each time to dissuade his nervous crew from possible mutiny by claiming the weed they saw came from nearby, though unseen, islands just over the horizon, although its presence must have equally baffled the admiral. Now that the oceans of the world are completely charted, the Sargasso Sea is confirmed as genuinely unique. Seaweed and the Sargasso Sea's other anomalies of wind and sea provide us with a keen insight into the greater mystery that the shape, mass, and rotation of our planet play in this one area. For there is no other area in the world's oceans where this occurs. Almost all currents of the world are circuitous and interlock large ovoid seas in the middle of our great oceans. For example, there are the South Pacific and Mentor currents, which form the circumference of the South Pacific, and the Benguela and Brazil currents in the South Atlantic. And Benguela is spelled Benguela. Charted though they may be, and frequently traveled besides, none has a particular history, or peculiar history, nor have they indigenous growth so thick and inexplicable. But why is the Sargasso Sea different? The Sargasso Sea has received popular and often tabloid press for generations before the Bermuda Triangle mythos developed, a mythos that may be partly a 20th century incarnation of the earlier legends. Lithographs showed sailing vessels becalmed and being devoured by the Sargassum. And even at the turn of the 19th century, seamen continued to tell tall tales about schooners and barkentines still being found sitting weed-shrouded in this stagnant void, along with ancient Roman and Phoenician triremes. Triremes. Not sure how to pronounce that one. It's spelled Triremes. Yes, Wu. There's a lot here that seems to suggest that we have time and space displacements within this area. And I want to say it has to do with magnetics, but I'm not entirely clear on this yet. Things that shouldn't be possible are happening in this area. And that includes radio transmissions that should be going to Fort Lauderdale that get picked up in New York. And while some people could explain it away being radio signals bouncing off of clouds back down, it's very unlikely that's the case with this, especially with how many different accounts there are of both ships and planes that have moved location in a very short amount of time off of their trajectory from where they're supposed to be going and then disappearing altogether. So we're doing our best here to try to make sense of everything that's happening, but I think it's safe to say this area has land anomalies under the water, and I do think the water has something to play into all of this as well. So it's just trying to articulate all of this and give someone a short 2-sentence answer. It's just not possible at this time because of all the information involved. Maybe one day I can make a 10 to 15 second reel explaining this all away, but right now is not the time to do that. And yeah, I'll have to look into Atlas Shrugged. I know that's a book. I didn't know there was a movie series on that. There does seem to be some interplay with Atlantis in all of this. Let's just humor the idea here for those that are somewhat skeptical of Atlantis. Let's just humor the idea there's a sunken city, an ancient city, and they had energy generators there that got buried in the sea along with all of the floodwaters. And that thing is firing off at random, it seems. This craft here discovered a road on the bottom of the Atlantic. So there's that. I don't know how to explain it to everyone, but I'm here to try to understand all of this better. I'll bring up the Sargasso weed here again. So you can see what they were talking about, how it's grape-like. You can see all the little protrusions on this stuff. And apparently it amassed in large quantities. And you have to wonder where it came from if it's in the middle of this. It's like a sea within a sea. It's the sea within the Atlantic Sea. You know, also with the Florida Keys, there seems to be star forts that are under the water there as well. So, I had said earlier in this deep dive series that while there is, and probably was, a flood or many floods that happened, ultimately the sea level rose and submerged these different cities that we know nothing about right now. But I was speculating back on one of the older shows that it's possible that the very same thing that caused the water to rise could also be what causes it to recede in the future. I'm thinking that some of these fissures in the ground are going to open back up, and some of it's going to drain the water out of the seabed. Not all of it, of course, but it may bring it back down to where that water level was prior. Either way, it's fun. It's fun to speculate on it. Alright, let's continue here. We're about to get into all of these different ships. I don't have photographs for every single ship here. In fact, there's not even drawings for some of these. It's just, these are taken from reports, logs, just everything written. We're lucky if we get a few drawings of ships that have disappeared, because this goes back to the 1490s at least. So, I do have a few here, and we're about to get into them, so let's continue. If anything were needed to dispel these old myths, it is provided by modern steam engines and the development of aircraft. For neither calms nor sargassum can affect aircraft, nor can they waylay large freighters that plow through the seaweed easily and steam through calms with little effort. Of course, the mysteries of the Sargasso Sea remain unsolved, a fact made clear by continuing disappearances and unusual power losses in and about it and the Triangle. Even within the last 20 years, derelict boats have been retrieved, like the yacht Penetration, found on July 26th, 1982, and a nameless British yacht found derelict 100 miles away 1 month later, or the sailboat Sophie, missing for a year, then found dismasted and in shambles in March 2001. I'd also like to make a comment here again. This book... This book was published in 2004. And there's going to be... So there's actually a sequel to this book that I did pick up. Get it right here. This one's from 2017. And it's a follow-up by the same author. 2017, yep. So the one we're reading from now is from 2004. The one that's coming up next in this deep dive series is from 2017. So I just wanted to make that clear. We're being as thorough as possible. So, carrying on. Unusual power loss now extends mysteriously to electrical generation as well. A dramatic total power loss befell the 13,000-ton refrigerator ship Andra, which suddenly went dead in the water some 200 miles from Bermuda in August 1999. Fortunately, its weak SOS was picked up by 2 vessels within a day's steaming. A sister ship, Frio Vladivostok, and the tug Powhatan. The tug towed Andra to Bermuda while Frio Vladivostok stayed alongside, supplying her with power to save her 17,000 tons of frozen chicken. And I don't believe I was able to find a photograph of that ship, so I apologize. Like I said, there's only so much that we could find in terms of documentation. But think of that, 17,000 tons of frozen chicken, and they were able to keep it going. That would have been a lot of lost food. Since so much of the triangle overlaps the Sargasso Sea, the triangle's connection with loss of power, whether wind or electrical, may be said to be a recorded mystery for hundreds of years. It seems more than coincidental that the one place on Earth where nature remains a mystery should also be a place where travel remains an equal mystery. The conundrum of missing planes and ships may be no greater than the conundrum of the very place where they so utterly vanish. The most reliable records of ship disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle date back to the 18th century, or the 1700s. The earliest registers list the following U.S. warship. In 1780, The General Gates mysteriously vanished. An engagement with a British warship is a possible explanation, but no warship claimed to have engaged her. Long after the American War of Independence, terse entries in marine journals continued to list disappearances. Curiously, many of them are warships, more mysterious than merchant vessels, one might imagine, since they are sturdily built, heavily gunned, and manned by large numbers of well-trained crews. In September 1799, the USS Insurgent, a 36-gun French-built warship with 340 crew, vanished. And there it vanished there as well. Next, the USS Pickering disappeared on a voyage to the West Indies in 1800 around August 20th. The USS Wasp, which mercilessly pummeled British shipping in the War of 1812, mysteriously disappeared in the Caribbean in October 1814. This fate was anticlimactic to her last sighting, an engagement with the British brig Atlanta, which she won by capturing the vessel and sending her back with a prize crew. She then sailed off on her next cruise and was never seen again. Next, the voyage of the USS Epervier in 1815 had an auspicious occasion. She carried the peace proposals for the ending of the War of 1812. She left Algiers for Norfolk, Virginia, and vanished, delaying the ending of hostilities. Looks like someone drew like a demonic shadow being behind it, doesn't it? That's wild. Wow. Speaking of wild, now this next ship we do not have a photograph of. But the USS Wildcat, with 31 crew, along with the schooner Lynx, with 40 men, and the schooner Hornet, which had won a notable victory over the HMS Peacock in 1812, all vanished in 1824. The first recorded merchant ship lost to mystery was actually not the ship at all, but her crew. In August of 1840, the Rosalie sailed through the Sargasso Sea bound for New Orleans and was found abandoned in the Bahamas in perfect condition and then brought into Havana. An astute London Times report recorded, "A singular fact has taken place within the last few days. A large French vessel bound from Hamburg to Havana was met by one of our small coasters and was discovered to be completely abandoned. The greater part of her sails were set, and she did not appear to have sustained any damage. The cargo, composed of wines, fruits, silks, and etc., was of a very considerable value, and was in a most perfect condition. The captain's papers were all secure in their proper place. The only living beings found on board were a cat, some fowls, and several canaries half dead with hunger. The cabins of the officers and passengers were very elegantly furnished, and everything indicated that they had only recently been deserted. In one of them were found several articles belonging to a lady's toilet, together with a quantity of ladies' wearing apparel thrown hastily aside, but not a human being was to be found on board. The vessel, which must have been left within a very few hours, contained several bales of goods addressed to different merchants in Havana. She is very large, recently built, and called the Rosalie. Of her crew, no intelligence has been received." Ain't that something? So I was actually talking about this earlier with that friend that stopped by. The Rosalie was found in perfect condition, as we just read here, but nobody was on it. And now there's other ships that have also been named that same name, so it kind of gets a little difficult to try to locate the proper photographs or drawings of this ship. So my apologies with that one as well. I couldn't find anything. Jason, you're saying you've been looking into the Great Lakes Triangle. Not as triangular, though. Yeah. I'll be starting a series here on this channel about the Great Lakes Triangle as well. I know I've been talking about that for quite some time, but I have at least 2 different books to start that series off with. And I have a trilogy of books of shipwrecks in Lake Superior. Lake Superior seems to be the area where this phenomenon occurs up there. At least, if you're speaking in general terms, Lake Superior is where all this activity's at. But we'll be starting a deep dive series on the Great Lakes Triangle here. Okay. Let's continue on here. The writer's mistake in naming her destination as Havana may be attributed to the fact that another derelict the Rossini, which was bound for Havana, had run aground and been abandoned by her crew. She was picked up around the same time as the Rosalie and taken to Nassau. Her crew got to shore. However, the fate of the crew of the Rosalie was never known. Records today merely list her launch date as October 1838 and note that she was built of 222 tons of wood. Subsequent disappearances include another U.S. schooner warship, Grampus, as seen right here. In March 1843, after sailing south of the Carolinas, the passenger ship City of Glasgow vanished with 450 passengers after she left New York in 1854 en route to Liverpool, taking the southern route. A particularly tragic disappearance is that of the British training brig HMS Atlanta in 1880. She had departed Bermuda for home with 290 cadets and was never seen again. The upsurge of interest in nautical history has extended to the information age. Hugh Brown, former London police officer, now a shipwreck researcher in Canada, maintains the International Registry of Sunken Ships, containing a database of several thousand entries on shipwrecks, salvage operations, and treasure discoveries extending back several centuries. Some of these include peaking and precise data on Spanish armadas down to individual ships, like the caravel El Dorado, which left Santo Domingo Hispaniola with 31 other vessels in July 1502. Heavily laden with gold and treasure, she was subsequently lost in a hurricane that sank all but 5 ships of the Armada in the Mona Passage near Puerto Rico. Records even exist as to the rumor she was carrying a gold table weighing 1.5 tons. Ten of the vessels have so far been located, but El Dorado, along with 17 other vessels, remains undisturbed somewhere below the triangle. Brown's continuing searches and updates of his records have brought to light a number of missing ships as well. Aside from his general interest in underwater archaeology and his goal of wreck discovery. These records include the 385-ton Canadian brigantine Arbutus, that's spelled Arbutus, which disappeared January 1st, 1899, on a voyage between Jamaica and New York. The schooner Chicopee, spelt Chicopee, 55 tons, last reported in the Gulf of Mexico on September 29th, 1915, heading toward the Triangle. The 382-ton schooner Doris, spelled Doris, like the name, last seen in the Gulf of Mexico on August 8th, 1915. The steamer Mountain Girl, last reported in the Gulf on May 5th, 1896. The 5,273-ton Santa Rita, which set sail from New Orleans to New York on October 20th, 1921. Theodore, spelled Theodor, a Norwegian steamer barkentine of 2,638 tons, which sailed from Tampa, Florida to Yokohama, Japan on March 2nd, 1906. The Thomas B. Schall, spelled Schall, a 62-ton sailing yacht, last reported in the Caribbean on December 14th, 1942. The 1,555-ton Benjamin F. Poole, spelled Poole, which went missing after leaving North Carolina and heading south in January 1914. The list goes on. The 605-ton schooner Sedgwick, spelled Sedgwick, which was last seen off South Carolina on February 11th, 1922. The cargo schooner Annie Hendry, spelled Hendry, which left the Turks Island in cargo of salt on December 16th, 1911. The 18-gun Spaniard Ardilla, spelled Ardilla, which was probably carrying silver when she vanished en route from Louisiana to Spain in 1808. The steamer Arcadia, spelled Arkadia, of over 2,200 tons, which left Louisiana in October 1910. The 790-ton schooner Baghdad, spelled Baghdad, which sailed from Key West on October 27th, 1921. These are all missing ships. They all disappeared. The steamer City of Everett, that's the ship's name, City of Everett, spelled Everett, which departed Santiago, Cuba on October 1st, 1923. And these are all missing ships, by the way, that Brown's research have brought to light. So these have gone missing, but they have been found. This is the list of found ships that I'm reading right now. The 139-foot Canadian cargo schooner E. Armstrong, which left Kingston, Jamaica, British West Indies on August 17th, 1918, in cargo of flour and mangrove bark destined for the French colony of Martinique. Martinique. French colony of Martinique, spelled Martinique. The 243-foot Austrian clipper Miroslav, spelled Miroslav, bound for Fiume, Italy, from Delaware via the Bahamas, which disappeared in February 1886. The 150-foot Canadian Nova Queen of 432 tons, which was bound from Turks Island to Nova Scotia in cargo of salt and disappeared on December 4th, 1934. The submarine Dorado, which disappeared between New London, Connecticut, and her destination, Panama, but was suspected sunk between Cuba and Florida by friendly fire around October 1943. It is impossible in any discussion of sea mysteries not to mention the strange case of the Ellen Austin, later relayed to British naval officer Rupert T. Gould, last name spelled Gould. She was a 210-foot schooner, one of Grinnell, Minturn and Company's Blue Swallowtail line of London, New York packets. North of the Sargasso Sea, in August 1881, she encountered an unusual sight: a derelict schooner. Her captain, A.J. Griffin, placed a prize crew aboard to sail her in tandem back to New York. After the vessels had been separated for a couple of days by a squall, the Ellen Austin again came upon the schooner, sailing erratically. The vessel was once again completely and mysteriously deserted. Hey, Beyond the Box, good to see you here. Good to see you here. Glad you made it. In 1909, the famous solo world circumnavigator Joshua Slocum, spelled Slocum, sailed out of Miami on his treasured yawl Spray, spelled Spray. He was never seen again, and no trace was found. Theories include the possibility that he was run down by a freighter. But freighters also disappear without any reason. By the 20th century, the steamer had command of the sea lanes. Welded steel double hulls and dual engines, plus flares and several lifeboats, were together thought to amount to a guarantee for secure passage on the ocean. Plus, a new invention was about to change the picture. As Warren Toote, spelled Tute, in his Atlantic Conquest, writes, quote, "By the time the 20th century dawned, although Marconi had proved his invention, the crew of a ship in any kind of trouble still fought a battle for life in utter loneliness, when in fact help might be there to hand a few miles beyond the horizon. Wireless telegraphy was to deprive the sea of its ancient terror of silence." End quote. Of course, like steel hulls, steam engines, flares, and lifeboats, wireless telegraphy and then radio telephony have failed to provide a fail-safe for disappearances. The modern terror of the sea is now a silence qualified. No SOS messages were picked up from the following ships: between March 6th and 27th, 1917, the 1,579 gross ton freightliner Timandra, spelled Timandra, bound for Buenos Aires from Norfolk, Virginia, and cargo of coal, disappeared. She carried 21 crew under Captain Lee. All right. Next, we have the USS Cyclops. I see what happened here. I made my sub too big. We fixed it. Alright. The fact that the U.S. Navy collier Cyclops never sent any kind of distress signal before disappearing was considered one of the greatest mysteries surrounding her. She left Rio de Janeiro in cargo of manganese ore for Baltimore, Maryland in February 1918. 309 Navy crew and passengers were on board, including the U.S. consul in Rio, Alfred L.M. Gottschalk, spelled Gottschalk. Barbados, where her master, George Worley, raised some eyebrows. Oh, I'm sorry here. Let me reread that. She made an unscheduled stopover on March 3rd at the British colony of Barbados, where her master, George Worley, raised some eyebrows by requesting extra money from the U.S. consul, Brockholst Livingston, to pay for more coal and more food supplies, alleging that his coal was inferior and wouldn't burn properly. Although Livingston was unusually reluctant to pay the sum of $775, he nevertheless did. He found Worley personally unlikable and also noticed that the Cyclops' crew stayed away from local British crews. The Cyclops left the next day and was last heard to report, quote, "all's well," end quote. Over the next 2 days, she was seen twice by a British patrol boat, which each time found her off course and guided her back to her correct heading. After this, the Cyclops fades away into the annals of sea mysteries. She sent no distress call, and no trace was ever found in an incredibly large and prolonged U.S. Navy search. And the mystery hardly stops there. So, before I continue on here, there is a drawing rendition of the ship, though we're seeing the photograph of the Cyclops right here next to me. This says, the USS Cyclops lost 1918, sister ship of Proteus and Nereus lost 1941. And the sister ships' spellings are Proteus and Nereus. So again, what we're looking at right here is also what's on the screen already. Oh my. And you know, there's a lot more detail in all of these stories here. There's varying detail, but the USS Cyclops has its own book by this same author here that we're reading from. In fact, yeah, the book is called A Passage into Oblivion, The Last Voyage of the USS Cyclops. And that book is also on the way here. So I'll probably incorporate that into this series at some point. But we're covering a good chunk of it right now with the USS Cyclops. Brenda, you're probably correct. Brenda from Beyond the Box is saying, I wonder if they can collect insurance on something that disappeared. Yeah, most times they would probably say it was lost at sea. Therefore, it was, they would probably tell the insurance that it sunk. And it was unable to be located. Although there was a lot of these, you have to think about this. Not only we have like the military vessels and planes that go disappearing, we also have the private planes and ships, as well as the commercial. Like the recent ones are like commercial planes and ships disappearing is kind of wild. But you see, the Bermuda Triangle does not have any discrimination. Whether ship or plane, doesn't matter what time frame you look into all of this, they're all susceptible to this. It's like if you enter the area, you start to play the game. Whatever game that ends up being. I guess that's for you to find out if you choose to sign up for it, right? I don't have any wishes to go there myself, because I probably would not come back. And I'm sure you all enjoy having me here, right? So the mystery hardly stops there. The loss of the Cyclops is literally chock full of coincidences that can suggest almost any unusual theory. First, both Gottschalk and Worley were discovered to be very pro-German. The Cyclops was operating in American waters because during her last voyage off France, certain acts of sabotage had been committed aboard, including lifeboat falls tampered with, gun lenses put in backward, and an unauthorized signal lamp attached to the top of the main mast. This led to the belief that pro-German elements aboard the Cyclops betrayed her to the Germans, and she was interned into a German port. Sabotage was considered also because a Rio newspaper published a notice that a requiem mass was to be held, quote, for the repose of the soul of Consul Gottschalk, who was lost when the Cyclops went down at sea, end quote. But it was published before the Cyclops was posted overdue. At this time, only the upper echelons in the Navy knew she was overdue. It was wondered if this article was not some form of tip-off by German spies signaling that a sabotage attempt on the Cyclops had been successful. But how would they have been informed unless someone survived? Mutiny was also suggested. Consul Livingston sent a telegram to Washington detailing his personal investigation on Barbados. It contained in part the following. Quote, Master alluded to by others as damned Dutchman, apparently disliked by other officers. Rumored disturbances en route hither men confined, and 1 executed. Number telegraphic or wireless messages addressed to master or in care of ship were delivered at this port. I have to suggest scrutiny here. While not having any definite grounds, I fear fate worse than sinking, though possibly based on instinctive dislike felt towards master. End quote. The Cyclops carried 3 prisoners being returned to the United States. 1 for a 20-year sentence, another for life, and the 3rd to be hanged. It was not certain if there was trouble over these prisoners or if Livingston merely misunderstood someone saying there were prisoners aboard, and that 1 was destined for execution. Worley would never have held a banana court in an illegal execution at sea unless he had been sure he was not going home to Baltimore. Livingston also discovered that Worley's excuse about his need for coal and food was a lie. Quote, from different sources gathered the following. He had plenty of coal, alleged inferior, took coal to mix, probably had more than 1,500 tons. I have ascertained he took here ton fresh meat, ton flour, 1,000 pounds vegetables. End quote. All of which suggests a prolonged sea voyage. The mystery of the Cyclops deepened after the war. Immediate searches of German ports proved the Cyclops had not been captured or betrayed to them by Worley and taken to Germany, as many rumors had insisted during the war. German records revealed no sabotage attempt planned against her. Any number of theories prevailed afterward, including splitting in 2, capsizing, cargo shifting, and combustion caused by coal dust from her earlier cargo, in contact with manganese ore, her present cargo. Splitting in half was proposed as much as 40 years later by Conrad A. Nervig, spelt Nervig, who wrote a delightful and possibly fanciful story in the Naval Institute Proceedings about his voyage south to Rio on the Cyclops as an officer on board. He had not only painted Worley as mentally unstable, given to striding around the Cyclops in his long johns, walking cane, and derby hat, but said that the Cyclops' deck creased up and down with the waves. Nervig's story and insights have been widely circulated, despite Bureau of Navigation records proving that no officer named Conrad Nervig was on board the Cyclops on her voyage south. In any case, what the Cyclops amounts to in the end is a veritable riddle of the sea. As much as 10 years after the fact, newspapers still referred to it as, quote, the greatest mystery of the sea, end quote, whenever rehashing the incident. The Navy opinion, maintained by its Historical Society, concludes, quote, the disappearance of this ship has been one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy, all attempts to locate her having been proved unsuccessful. Many theories have been advanced, but none that satisfactorily accounts for her disappearance. End quote. I'm just taking a brief pause here as we recollect. That was a lot of information there. Just the sheer amount of disappearing ships that have like never been recovered. It's wild. But I'm glad that we have this one researcher in here that did find the missing ships on the seabed. But there's still plenty that have not been found at all, not even pieces of them. So you just have to wonder what happened to them. How y'all doing out there? Hope you're hanging in there. I'm doing well with getting through this. We do have up through page 82, and we are on page 60. So, I hope I can get through it today. I really hope so. But it might end up being quite a long part of this series here if we do. We'll see how I feel as we keep going. Subsequent disappearances of freighters have included the tramp steamer Cotopaxi, spelled Cotopaxi, which last signaled herself in difficulty off the Florida East Coast on December 1st, 1925. She reported she was listing from damage in the number 1 hold, then went silent. Then we have a whole paragraph in parentheses here. The 770-foot Leader L experienced a similar problem in March 2000 while northeast of Bermuda. But in this case, 12 crew were able to get off and be rescued. Contradictory reports from them still cloud exactly what happened to the huge vessel. The first report was that a metallic object struck the vessel and sank it in 45 seconds. A second report states that a 45-foot hull plate fell off. The last would explain the flooding of one hold, but not the flooding of other holds enough to sink the vessel or sink it so rapidly. A third scenario considered that both the previous reports were accurate. That an object hit the Leader L in one hold with such force that it penetrated the hull and shuttered the vessel so violently that a loose hull plate fell off, causing 2 holds to flood and drag the vessel under in less than a minute. End parentheses. Hi Juan, good to see you. Beyond the Box says, Steve, let's get a boat and go looking. I said I am not doing that. I'm not gonna be looking for stuff in the Bermuda Triangle. By all means, Brenda, you can. But I recommend not doing that. Because you may not return. Yes, Brenda, it's good to see everyone here tonight. I really appreciate all you being here with me. Disappearances have included the Sodufco, which we have a photograph of here. And this is the last ship that I have of a photograph before we'll turn back to the Illuminati slideshow. With 29 crew, which sailed in March of 1926 from New York to Los Angeles with 4,000 tons of assorted cargo. Although the waterways to and from the Panama Canal and U.S. East Coast are heavily traveled, no ship reported hearing any distress call or seeing any wreckage. In 1938, the 420-foot Anglo-Australian, bound from Cardiff, Wales to British Columbia with a crew of 38 under Captain Parslow, last signaled herself off the Azores. Quote, passing Fayal this afternoon, spelled F-A-Y-A-L. All well, end quote, and was not heard from again. Her course to Panama would next take her through the Triangle. Excellent. I'm just reading the chat here. Yeah, try to figure out what's going on with Paul over on Abe's channel. Maybe one of the moderators can see what's going on. Also, for live chats, you should go up to the top of the chat and see if you're getting displayed live chat or top chat. If you have it under top chat, then you're not getting every single message that's coming through. It's just a heads up. And also, I'm not monitoring when Abe is going on, so he may start his stream while we are live here. But, just bear with me here. And, hopefully we don't overlap too much, because I know I'm doing this pretty late. But I had to get this going. It's been quite a few weeks. But I did have a safe trip. So that's all good. Alright. So we're going back to the slideshow of the Illuminati. Since this is relevant here. Alright. Various theories, such as mines, and the Spanish Civil War was in progress at the time, sudden tidal waves, and piracy were entertained to explain this incident, as well as other disappearances. However, in the case of the Sam Key, spelt S-A-M-K-E-Y, the Board of Investigation went way beyond speculation and insisted that the vessel keeled over. The Sam Key, with a crew of 43, was last reported in the same vicinity of the Azores in February 1948. Her last transmission was the same. Quote, all well, end quote. I don't know, Brenda, do you want to experience that? Think everything's fine? Radio out that everything is good, and then, poof, you just disappear. And nobody knows what happened to you. I wouldn't want that. That's why I advise against going in the Bermuda Triangle. Although some stray mine from World War II might have crossed her path, the board was adamant and insisted that she had capsized, although the vessel had only been in ballast with no cargo, and there wasn't a scrap of evidence found to suggest anything. her course would have taken her through the triangle, with her next position report due just as she would have been entering the area. Do I need to explain further? I don't think so. During World War II, a torpedo often spelled sudden death for freighters. However, in many cases, survivors were able to scramble to a life raft or onto floating wreckage of some kind to be rescued later by passing vessels. Although both the Anglo-Australian and the Samkey were sailing in peacetime, they were heading deep into the Atlantic, far from any rescue station and passing vessels. But freighters sailing along the busy U.S. East Coast have also disappeared. The 185-foot coaster Sandra, with a cargo of DDT, left Savannah, Georgia, for Puerto Cabello, Venezuela, on April 5th, 1950. She last reported herself off Florida. So there's an image here. It says a small coaster like the Sandra, just to get an idea of what this particular ship looked like. Trying to get it to... There we go. The coastal freighter Imbros, spelled Imbross, with 7 crew, vanished on December 18th, 1975, after a brief and garbled SOS. The vessel had been en route to Quebec from Mobile, Alabama, with assorted cargo. A court case involving her was not settled until 1998. So it vanished in 75, and a court case continued on until 98. The court, not being able to establish any bad weather, blamed the owners. Disappearances of smaller vessels, such as yachts, sailboats, schooners, and fishing vessels, are more numerous. The Bahamas attract many yachters from Florida and the U.S. East Coast. Moreover, the Bahamas are themselves, in a way, like a huge Venice, where a boat is indispensable for traveling between settlements on nearby islands. A boat is valuable property in the Bahamas, which remain one of the few places in the world where piracy is still punished by hanging. It can be variously estimated that anywhere from a couple of hundred to 10 times that amount have vanished in the last 25 years, depending on how the Coast Guard wishes to incorporate boats into statistics, while at the same time constantly reminding any inquirer that they maintain no statistics on missing boats. But district offices can maintain a database list of vessel names for whatever reason, and within these can be found the designation, quote, overdue, end quote. Which for the pedantic is considered a very different thing. Asking for information on, quote, overdue vessels, end quote, can produce about 120 such cases a year in the 7th District alone. although they may be searched for or alerts raised to be on the outlook for them, since the Coast Guard cannot investigate them, nor does the NTSB. The ultimate outcome remains forever in limbo if a boat is not quickly found. A rough idea of the nature of some of the vessels over the last 50 years can be gleaned from inexplicable circumstances documented in other more detailed cases. While he was head of the U.S. Coast Guard Search and Rescue, Captain John Waters observed, quote, "When a vessel equipped with reliable long-range radio disappears, we must presume that whatever occurred was the result of such sudden and overwhelming disaster that the stricken ship was unable to transmit even a brief call for help," end quote. A perfect example of this may be found in a case Captain Waters personally remembered. The Home Sweet Home left Bermuda for St. Thomas on January 13th, 1955. A weather front was scheduled to move into the area from Louisiana in a day or two, but Waters remembers a radio call coming into RCC, which is the Rescue Coordination Control, in Bermuda only hours after it left. Quote, "RCC Bermuda, this is the HSH," end quote. And another transmission, quote, "It was a calm, steady voice," end quote. That's what Waters recalled. It was a calm, steady voice. Nevertheless, Home Sweet Home never replied to Bermuda's hail to go ahead. No trace was found of the sailing yacht and its 4 persons in a subsequent search. Other yachts have disappeared without trace, though not always so dramatically between routine calls. In January 1958, the schooner Bounty disappeared when sailing between Miami and Bimini, a distance of only 50 miles. On April 16th, 1960, the Ethel C, the letter C, went missing off the Virginia Capes en route to fishing grounds. Around April 5th, 1961, the Callista III was sailing from Norfolk to the Bahamas. In 1962, the schooner Evangeline. In November 1962, the 56-foot schooner Windfall disappeared en route to Bermuda with 5 crew. The 36-foot ketch Dancing Feathers, it's the name of the ship, in 1964 en route from the Bahamas to North Carolina. The Enchantress, a 58-foot schooner, on January 13th, 1965, 150 miles southeast of Charleston, after it signaled a strong wind had suddenly heeled it over. L'Avenir, spelled L'Avenir, in November 1977 en route to Bermuda from Maryland with 4 persons. The only vessel to leave a trace was Revonoc, spelled Revonoc, an all-weather racing yawl that set sail from Key West to Miami January 1st, 1958. This was its dinghy Revonoc Jr., which turned up 80 miles north of Miami at Jupiter Inlet. The dinghy of the yacht Evelyn K was also found in bizarre circumstances in March 1948. Al Snyder, a famous racing jockey, and two friends went fishing on the Evelyn K, but it was then later found moored in the lee of one of the Florida Keys without a soul on board. There was no immediate worry since the dinghy was gone, and the three were thought to have taken it to do some fishing closer to shore. A search, however, found the dinghy weeks later across the Florida Bay in an area called the 10,000 Islands. The dinghy was damaged, its motor ripped off, and it seemed that one of the men had tried to tie himself down in it to prevent being taken. Among the cases of missing boats, the case of the Snow Boy, spelled SNO''BOY, has a stunning element to it as well. A PT boat converted into a fishing vessel, it left Kingston, Jamaica for Northeast Caye on July 2nd, 1963, with 40 paying passengers aboard. When it failed to return from a 2-day fishing excursion, a search was mounted that found among its floating fishing poles its two dinghies, one right side up but completely empty. Not one of the 40 made it into a lifeboat, or if any did, they did not remain for very long. In the catalog of inexplicable disappearances, the case of the Witchcraft is the most striking. On December 22nd, 1967, it left Miami with its owner, hotelier Dan Barack, spelled B-U-R-A-C-K, and his friend, Father Patrick Horgan, spelled Horgan. Horgan had at long last accepted Barack's invitation to go out in his 25-foot cabin cruiser to see Miami's Christmas lights from the sea. They were going no farther than 1 mile from shore, remaining in the vicinity of buoy number 7 at Miami Harbor's entrance. At 9 p.m., RCC received a call from Barack for assistance. He told them he would need a tow back to Miami, for he thought he had struck something underwater and damaged his prop. A Coast Guard cutter was dispatched immediately, and at 9:19 p.m., it was in the general vicinity awaiting a flare Barack had promised to fire to pinpoint his position. But no flare was ever forthcoming, and an expanded search out into the Gulf Stream as far as 1,200 square miles never located a trace of the Witchcraft. Barack was seen on boating safety, Barack was keen on boating safety and had a number of life jackets aboard. Also, all his seat cushions were floatable. He had also taken the precaution and extra expense of adding built-in flotation to the boat. Although this does not imply buoyancy, it does mean that some part of the vessel, even when waterlogged, should remain visible above the water. A cryptic conclusion by the Coast Guard. Quote, "We presume they are missing but not lost at sea," end quote, may have been influenced by the fact that everything points to the impossibility that the cabin cruiser could so utterly vanish. Although a squall hit later that night, it could not have drawn the disabled Witchcraft beyond the reach of the Coast Guard in 19 minutes. Alright, I see that Spiritual Encrypted Encounters is live now. So, I'll finish up this page. I have a good marker here for where we can stop for tonight. I mean, we have another 18 pages to go, and we're almost at 2 hours. So I'm just trying to keep this concise so you guys can listen to this. And either if you want to binge all of these are in a playlist. This is number 17 in this deep dive series. But I also want to be articulate with everything I'm reading so that you understand what I'm saying. And it does take energy to read through all of this. And I could keep going, but I also don't want to be infringing on Abe's live stream as well. We try to be good with not streaming at the same time if we can avoid it. But I'll finish up this portion of this chapter here. And I guess we'll just continue next week with it. So next week, Thursday, 8 p.m. Central Time is when we're planning to continue this series. So I'll wrap this section up and then we'll call it for today. And I will be heading over to Abe's channel. It's open mic night tonight. And I do like frequenting as a guest over there. So feel free to follow me along over there, because it's probably going to be another good one. We've been having some really interesting conversations over there. But let's wrap up this part of the chapter here, and then it'll be a good breaking point until next week. In March 1974, the 54-foot luxury yacht Saba Bank, spelled S-A-B-A-B-A-N-K, disappeared while on her maiden voyage, with 4 crew in the Bahamas. Dutch Treat was sailing between Cat Cay, near Bimini, and Miami on July 24th, 1974, and never arrived. A year later, Meridian, bound to Bermuda from Norfolk, never made port. The motor sailor High Flight disappeared between Bimini and Miami in April 1976. On December 16th, 1976, a 40-foot sloop with 17 passengers disappeared between St. Kitts and Dominica. In April 1980, the 43-foot Polymer 3 disappeared between the Bahamas and Florida. The yacht belonged to Lester Conrad, the former CEO of a chemical company, hence its name. Along with his friend William Faulkner, the two were returning to the United States from a vacation. The failure to find any trace prompted Conrad's wife to post a $25,000 reward for any information about her husband. And we have a little etching or sketch of the long distance yacht like the Polymer 3. So I'll show you that right here. During the night of November 5th to 6th of 1984, the 32-foot sports fisherman Real Fine, spelled R-E-A-L-F-I-N-E, also vanished between Freeport, Grand Bahama, and Fort Lauderdale, with 3 crew aboard. 2 Canadians vanished with their 25-foot cabin cruiser between Freeport and West Palm Beach on February 22nd, 1985. Although fishing vessels and ocean-going tugs are usually better equipped for sea, a number have strangely disappeared in the triangle, without any clue to what befell them. On April 22nd, 1975, the 73-foot shrimper Dawn was last seen at sunset off Smith Shoals Light near Key West. The next day she was gone, along with her 4 crew. The ocean-going tug Boundless vanished in December 1975. The May Doris, spelled Maedoris, with 4 crew, left Cape May on October 27th, 1992, and was never seen again. April 15th, 1999, the Miss Fernandina of Fernandina Beach, Florida, an 85-foot shrimper, last reported herself experiencing an electrical drain that her net was caught in her propeller. Or she was experiencing an electrical drain and that her net was caught in her propeller. Other nearby boats responded, and subsequent Coast Guard overflights spotted what appeared to be one of her life jackets floating on the water. And with that, we will break in this chapter. So we have... Let's see where we're at here. We're on page 65 of chapter 3. The Riddle of Vanished Ships. We're right here on this paragraph. Oh, you know what, Brenda? I'm going to send everyone over to Abe's. Hold up. I'll get a link up in here. But this will be it for today. I really appreciate y'all being here. I, again, do my best to get you as much information and knowledge as possible so that you can go on your own and do further research here. And that's all I really want to do, is share information and have it be engaging as well. So, and since Abe has given me many new watchers and subscribers, I really don't like streaming at the same time he is, and I did do this pretty late into the evening, but I got the link up here for everyone to go hop. We're gonna do a stream hop, and we're gonna go raid his channel so that we could bring him a few new viewers here. So I appreciate all of you for being here. And again, I will be streaming tomorrow night. We'll be doing another Madness Hour in honor of the passing of Hulk Hogan. And that that'll be bittersweet, because no one wants to celebrate the passing of anybody. But we'll celebrate the life of him. And we'll probably talk a little more about that over on Abe's channel in a moment. But this will be it for tonight. Sunday will be another installment of Let's Talk About It. And we sure got a lot to talk about there. Got several things related to the Matrix franchise to talk about over on Sunday's show. So that'll be it for today. I appreciate all you being here. We're ending this before midnight. So, until the next one. Class dismissed.